Kevin Knight, I want to talk about. Now, you may wonder, why do you want to talk about Kevin Knight? Well, I was listening to Tony Khan presser, and this is before Double or Nothing. He does the media conference call, whatever you want to call it. And somebody asked him a question about, I can't remember what the actual question was, but Tony oftentimes, he's got a number of talking points that he wants to say, and he's probably got them written down or in his head. And it doesn't really matter what the question is. He will get around to what he wants to say.
Yeah.
So whatever that question was, it wasn't about Kevin Knight. I think it might have been about the number of people in creative or something. And he talked about how, well, it's really like, it's a lot less people now. And he's more in the weeds and all this. And then he's like, and, we've had some challenging issues recently because, for instance, Jay White got injured. And, we had big plans for Jay White. And then we had just signed Kevin Knight. And so essentially Kevin Knight was given an opportunity that he might not have otherwise got. And he said, I had plans for Kevin Knight, but they weren't necessarily what they ended up being. And Kevin Knight's done such a great job.
Mm-hmm.
He says it's like when on a sports team, when someone gets injured and you have your backup come in and he ends up doing a better job than the guy that he replaced or as good. And then that guy ends up earning a permanent place on the team. And he says, and now I'm almost to the point where, I wish I hadn't have agreed to let him go do the New Japan tournament because he's knocking it out of the park. And, and he's going to be a big part of things when he comes back. So I normally, I'll listen to these things. Oftentimes they're after the fact, or, this time is actually the next day. And I normally will criticize, 90% of what he says. But in this case, I really liked what he said. I liked the way he put it. And I know some people don't like the way that Kevin Knight was being booked. I mean, you can look at it two ways. He wasn't winning his matches, but he was in there with the top guys in the company and he was getting over.
Mm-hmm.
And he did beat the guys, that he should have beat. So that's good. And he was being programmed to work with Okada, which is, say what you want about Okada. A lot of people don't like what he's done in AEW, but I mean, obviously in their minds, he's right at the top,
Yes.
He's never been beat. So I think that what he's been doing and what he said about it, I do believe that's how he actually feels. And so I have good hopes for Kevin Knight. He's, kind of got a mediocre record in the Best of the Super Juniors. I think he had 6 points after 6 matches, I think. So, 500 record. But, he's getting over there. I mean, he's got a history over there. So he was probably already over. But I think he's in a good position when he comes back. He's probably going to be feuding with Okada. He's got a feud with Roosh. And I would expect that he'll be in the mix probably for the TNT title, at some point this year. So, I'm happy for the guy.
So is your statement or is your take that you liked Tony Khan's comparison and his explanation of the booking of Kevin Knight and Kevin Knight sort of taking advantage of opportunity in X, Y, and Z?
Absolutely. Because I do think and you may even look at it oh, well, if he didn't see Kevin Knight in that light, maybe that's something about his talent judgment. And I don't think you can say that because a lot of times you sign a prospect thinking, okay, this is going to be a guy in 3 years I'm going to be able to build a company around. But right now he's just going to be kind of treading water. Whereas he comes in, gets over right away. And it's oh crap, I got something now I didn't think I had, so that's kind of where I think Tony Khan is coming from. And, so it's like the guy that has just a knockout spring training and he's knocking balls over the fence and he earns a spot on the team. And then somebody gets hurt and it's oh my God, this guy's hitting 400 with 6 home runs and 30 RBIs, in the middle of May. And you're wow, we didn't see this coming. That's kind of what I think.
The problem with
Kevin Knight.
The problem with comparing wrestling to real sports is, for the most part, we would like to believe that real sports is based on a meritocracy. You play the best, you are the guy, or you earn your spot because you played the best. And in pro wrestling, it is not always like that. A lot of times it's who your friends are and, what connections you have. And, let's say in Logan Paul's instance, what is your social reach? That helps him, right? Which is a sense, it's part of being a meritocracy because he does have marketability that other wrestlers don't have or they did not create for themselves. But when you look at someone like Kevin Knight, I will admit I knew a little bit about him, but I didn't know, I didn't study tape on him or anything. So when he came in, I was oh man, there's that old Shaquille O'Neal meme where he was like, I think he told Christian Wood, he was like, I have to apologize. I was not up to speed on your game or whatever. Like, you know, like getting Shaquille O'Neal, someone who talks about basketball for a living. So, you know, I needed to apologize to Kevin Knight because I was like, wow, I did not know that this dude was this good. But you have people like our buddy Jeremy Feinstein, whose beat is New Japan. And he's like, I've been singing this guy's praises for 18 months. Like anybody who watches him closely, Tony Khan included, should have known that he was the goods. So in that instance, when you compare it to real sports, I think it's a little bit of a flawed comparison because maybe Tony could have said it a different way, which is he's like our top AA prospect who we know in 2 years is going to be a top guy. He just accelerated that because of the opportunity. If you say it like that, I think it's a little bit more meaningful because it shows that you actually know your guy. The way that he said it, I think some of the people may have had a little bit of a frustration of basically like, how can you not know he was that good? Do you have eyes? Like that kind of thing. And, you know, Tony's going to get crap for that a lot because he's just talks too much. Like there's so much opportunity for him to say something that bothers somebody because he is the main mouthpiece for that company. So that's why he gets in, you know, he's not 100% favorable except with the AEW hardcores where he can't do any wrong. And then the opposite side of that is he can't do anything right for the people who don't like AEW. So he's
right.
You know, and I take him for what I try and take him for what he says and for what I think he means, kind of like what you just said. But sometimes he just says the wrong thing and he's just like,
well, and you always have to remember he's a promoter. So, you know,
absolutely.
And so 90% of what comes out of a promoter's mouth is, you know, somewhat bullshit.
But if you were looking at this Kevin Knight thing, like basically on what Tony said, he should have a plan for Kevin Knight when he comes back, right?
And I think he does. I think that's why. And I know that, like Jeremy, you know, to mention him again, he was upset of the way that Okada, or it was Rush actually, that beat up Kevin Knight before his match with Okada, and then basically essentially like beat him up on the way out. And then he comes into Best of Super Juniors, and that was actually part of the story. In his first, I think he lost his first 3 matches, and Walker Stewart, who is one of the best, he played off of the AEW thing, and he said, well, he's still not 100% after being beat up in his last AEW match. So he said it's going to take him time to get up. And then sure enough, that's the story that they told. So I think that's probably the mindset Jeremy was coming in. Like, yeah, you know, maybe Tony's got plans for him, but he's not doing his business partners any favors, and he's not doing Kevin Knight any favors. Right. And I kind of look at it like, geez, you know, if he was put in a match with Okada, he had to get beat up ahead of time, and then Okada wins. Well, now he's got a feud when he comes back with Rush and with Okada. So I do.
The problem is though, you know, he's not beating Okada.
Oh,
no. And you know, he's probably either beating Rush or going 50-50 with Rush. So we can sort of predict, huh? I mean, he's going to get beat up against Rush.
Yeah. I mean, Rush has a stable, and Kevin Knight's got Speedboat.
You know what I would like to see? I would like to see an actual program between Kevin Knight and Ricochet. I think that would be really good.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And you know, and Jet Speed against, you know, anyone, you know, Young Bucks, FTR, Hurt Syndicate. I don't know about that one.
Yeah, I don't know.
But yeah, Edge and Christian, if they get back together, certainly. But I do think the other thing I think is if Kevin Knight comes back and is pushed at a higher level than what was expected, that is like the best advertisement for any young wrestlers that are free agents that are trying to choose between AEW or, you know, realistically probably NXT. They may look at, oh man, you know, like I could be Kevin Knight and or I could be, you know, whatever, pick your guy that shows up in AEW or in NXT, and you know, he's doing okay, but not setting the world on fire.
You know, if Tony, you know, and maybe Tony was just being a little bit too honest, because what he could have said is, you know, we had big plans for Kevin Knight when Jay White got hurt. He was the right guy to, you know, to go on a quicker path because we had plans for Jay, and Kevin is so good. We could just plug him into what we had for Jay. He could have said something like that. So maybe he's just being a little too honest.
Yeah, like, oh man, I got stuck, and I was like,
and
come here.
I was waiting for Nick Khan to retweet and go, see? Like, actually, Nick Khan doesn't tweet, but see? He signed him to bench him.
Yeah.
He did not, by the way.